Hello and welcome to In the Making, a series of conversations from North Bennet Street School where we connect with a range of new voices, fields, and perspectives. Before we get into our conversation, we want to thank the many supporters that make our programs possible, including the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the Holt and Bugby Company, and all of our corporate partners in craft. My name is Kristen Odell. I'm an NBSS staff member and host of In the Making. Today is a very special episode of our series as we're sharing stories and experiences from two widely different generations of growing up in the North End through the scope of North Bennet Street School and North Bennet Street Industrial School. Chris Pienta graduated from Preservation Carpentry just last year and essentially grew up running around the North End, while 75 years prior, Dominic Valente, on my left, as a 10-year-old, was building toys and furniture at North Bennet Street Industrial School. When I get out of the way, you'll see a chair that he made at age 10. That's just a work of art and priceless. We have so many questions for you both. Welcome, and thank you for sharing your story and your time today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm going to scoot away, and then we're going to get into some questions.
Okay.
In your mind, how does NBSS fit into the fabric of the North End community? Your time, in 2023, and Dominic, your time growing up in the North End in 1948.
Well, 1948, which I was 10 years old, and I was what we call a member of the North Bennet Street Industrial School. And I, even to this day, I can't get used to not using industrial. And it was more of a after school function building. And I always liked to bang nails and saw. So I took what they call cabinet making. And through the years, in the chair behind me is one of the pieces that I made. I made 5 or 6 pieces through the years. Each year was a different one.
What were some of the other pieces?
Well, I'm going on. After the chair, I made a bookcase, and then I made a second bookcase, and I made for my mother a swivel table. So we can move the TV, because you have to remember 1948. Well, even up to 1954s, and not everybody had a television. So we were lucky we had it. My uncle gave us a television, and but it was fixed. And I said to my mother, I can make a table that you can turn the TV and see it from in the living room. She loved that, and I did. Then I ended up making my own drawing board, which I became an architect eventually. Actually, the Boston Architectural Center at the time, which is now the Boston Architectural College.
Right.
And I have very close, even to this day, knits in the North End. So I've seen it go. There's a period of time I was not in the North End too much. I would say between the very late 60s and the early 70s. And then I have friends that, of course, we grew up all in the North End. I was very close to my friends. We had 10 friends that were very, very close. And I, unfortunately, there's only 2 of us left.
Did you all, as a neighborhood group of kids, did you all use the services and the community of North Bennet Street Industrial School? We
did for dancing. I know that. Yeah. We all went dancing, which I believe was Wednesday night. And in fact, we were very fortunate. Eventually, he became a hit. Jerry Vale was one of the entertainers that came to our end of the year dance.
Wow.
Okay. And of course he volunteered his time. Everybody who did anything for the children of the North End at the industrial school was a gift, volunteer.
Wow,
Right.
that's amazing.
Yeah. And of course, I bowled with North Enders, and like 10, well, some of the bowlers, most of the 10 we all bowled together. Plus, we had a few others friends that joined us in, and we stood close, very close, and up to the deaths of. We did celebrate our 75th birthday.
Mm,
We were
You were all together still.
together, except for one.
Yeah.
Except for one. Yes. Yeah.
I'm gonna pass it over to Chris.
Sure.
What's your feeling about how NBSS fits into the fabric of the community? We sort of just touched on this briefly ago. What's your take on that in 2023?
So I personally knew about NBSS for years because it provided the social service aspects of it provided a lot to my family growing up. And so I knew about it. I was, as a child, my mom would take me by the windows of the school and say, wow, let's look at all this beautiful the cabinets, the jewelry, like these people are so talented, and always told me that knowing my interests, that she thought that I should come to this school. And I had my aunt went to and the industrial school when it was more social services for camps, and my mother taught guitar here, and I know people who went to daycare here. And then so when I eventually came, after many years of not going and doing other things, and when I eventually came to school here, it was interesting because the North End was very different from when I was growing up around the North End. So I had never gone to a place like the Thinking Cup or some of like where all the students would go. And
how would you say, what is an example of something that was very different from when you grew up to when you were starting here as a student?
So when normally we would walk around and there would be people that would be hanging out of the windows, and I would know them and I would say, hey, sometimes they would drop a basket with cookies. And I knew a lot of the people on the different streets, and they were a lot older, but they were still here. And it was, I remember, I'm not sure if this still even happens, but the spice shop would have slush that they would make. But I hadn't seen it out there in years now, but it was this very tart lemon slush. It was so good. And so in the summers, like, I would be so excited to get that slush. And my mom, when she was growing up, she would go to the cheese shop for cheese, the spice shop for spices, like every single, the butcher for meat. My grandfather worked in cold storage around here. So it was really a community, and there were and my aunt had a little convenience store here, and so I would work in the convenience store. We knew all of like the locals, the customers. There was the barber shop right on the corner, and now I felt like there's so many new businesses that weren't like locally owned that are here. I feel like back then there was CVS that had come in, but it was more locally owned places where it's like, oh, I would call my aunt and be like, oh, what's the best sub shop right now? And she'd be like, oh, go to this place, like my friend owns this, or go here or there.
What is the best sub shop?
I don't even know anymore, but
Across the street from Monica's.
Yeah, Monica's, yeah.
There's a good store. I don't recall the name, but it's on the actually it's on the corner of Salem Street and Prince Street.
Well, Dominic has mentioned previously that, I mean, what you're referring to is community was very different in the North End back then, even when you were running around the streets here. And it touches on something that we've discussed about how growing up in the North End, North Bennet Street Industrial School was very social services based. And so it was just sort of
Yes.
a natural part of your neighborhood,
Mhm.
as opposed to this, currently it's sort of this extraordinary thing.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, and I feel like it has such a reputation, the school, for being so extraordinary and having students come out with great talents. It's like a different, it's more artistic trade school than some other trade schools, and I think that reputation is all over the US, and it's in the North End. I feel like my family knew about that, but my mom said that she didn't know many people who went. They use the community services part of it, but then she didn't know many people who actually went to the school, but she knew it was just a very high-end
Mhm.
craft trade school. So it had a wonderful reputation, which is still there, but I don't know if the people now coming to the school know about the North End and everything else that the school
right.
offer to the community and are going now for the education that you're getting here, because also the location's amazing with the Old North Church and
Mhm.
like.
Well, for a
See,
preservation
yeah,
carpenter for
yeah,
you.
yeah, and
I just think that perspective is what makes this conversation between the two of you so interesting, that in one hand, it was just a building on the corner that provided you with a place to play and go make chairs, learn basic
Right.
techniques. And for you, it's career changing,
yeah,
it's
definitely,
life changing.
definitely. And I think it was interesting for me because when I told my aunt, who she grew up on Endicott Street and lived there her whole life, until she passed away. Right, actually, you can see the building right there at the North End Rehab. She passed away in 2020. But before she passed away, I knew that I was going to be coming here. And I told her I was going here, and she said, "Oh, I went there too." But she was thinking that I was going to like kind of the community service, like the social service type school. But so it was just really interesting that she had that perspective, and that was still part of my life. And then my perspective of knowing what the school was also there. And then coming here, not a lot of students here knew about the North End. So it's like, this was my community, but all the people that I knew pretty much here and family here, a lot of them passed away. Like my grandparents passed away really young. My aunt was the last person left. And then her friends a lot of them have passed away, or they're in the rehab right there. Or they had to move out of the city because it got too expensive, and none of my family could afford to buy anything here. They grew up with not a lot of money, so everything changed. So then the students here, I feel like, don't have necessarily the same connection. This is a school to them, and they connect to the neighborhood, but they don't have the long ties.
Right.
So I felt like it was like two lives, living the life here as a student, and then also understanding the other part.
That's a very unique perspective that you have. I mean, I don't know any other recent student that would have that perspective. It's really interesting. Would you share, and I said that currently this North Bennet Street School has this effect of changing lives. And I don't dismiss that it did for you as a young child. It just was a different type of, social hub. Certainly affected your life and changed your life, I'm sure. Is there a teacher, instructor, or an experience that you remember that was, that impactful as a student?
Well, those that taught the cabinet making course was, meant a lot to me because I enjoyed making things and creating. Eventually I became a creative, an architect, and it was only really up to my early teenage years, and then as I got older, I drifted more away, and then of course I ended up getting married, so that's made a difference. But again, if I were to be born again, I want to come back to the North End.
Well, would you have you after later in your life you went on to become an architect, you went to Boston Architectural Center,
Right.
Now college. Before you made furniture here as a 10-year-old at the industrial school, did you know that you wanted to go into the creative world? Did you know you wanted to be an architect, or was this a tipping point for you?
would say I knew I wanted to be an architect more in when I got to my 7th grade of junior high school.
This is when you saw the buildings being pulled down and going up and you couldn't.
Yeah, it was, of course, this was all before the West End came after I knew already what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an architect. Well, the 7th grade, and I think you're 12 years old in the 7th grade, or 13 years old.
Ish,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been so long for me, I have to remember. It's still called junior, no, it's called middle school, we call it junior high school, so,
yeah.
that's how old I am. But, I didn't really make it a community, except for the fact that my friends, we all bowled together, and even though we drifted away from the North End, in fact, our bowling league name was the Corner Bowling League. Because we always refer to meeting at the corner, and to be,
Which corner?
but I was just gonna get to tell you, neither corner. It was Joe Black's, and he was on Unity Street in the middle, next to the old North Church. And it was on Salem Street, facing the industrial school, okay? But it wasn't on the corner, so, but we called ourselves
Neither
the corner.
corner.
And we, like I said, we stood together for years and years. So I think the industrial school, we all went there to say to play or do whatever little things, the printing shop and so forth. I think taught us that even though you drifted away from me being on Hanover Street as an example, or the end of Hanover Street, because Hanover Street's a long street, we sort of played with, obviously both being friendly with groups that would be on a different corner, okay? Because again, the North End is a tenement area and it's vertical, even though it's only 4 stories, but it's vertical. Whereas everybody leaves the North End and they go to Medford, some of them and so forth, and it's not vertical.
Right,
Okay,
it's sprawled.
it's sprawled and not vertical. So I don't remember how many children, how many boys and girls there were, say approximately my age at the time. I do know that when mothers call for, a mother calls for boys, it's time to come home, okay? And we all drifted to, but we were at a corner, so all of a sudden, you don't have that anymore, but because we as we grew up and we had cars and so forth, getting married, my bowling league, we were all married. Eventually, we were single and eventually we were all married. So, and I think it's because of our bringing up, sort of going to the industrial school, even though it was for the dances, okay? And you see you have lots of girls and lots of boys. There was only a few girls that lived on my block in the North End, but at the industrial school, at the dance, there were probably 50 girls that came from the North End. You knew them only because you went to the dance. You didn't know them from school because they were not in school with you.
Right. Dominic, you have a long history in the North End. Can you tell us in brief the path of your grandparents, how they came here, landed on Fleet Street, to your parents?
Yeah, well, we'll start with my father's parent. Well, I never knew my grandfather. My grandmother came here in 1897 with my aunt, who was 7 years old at the time. And she got off in a boat. I have no roots at Ellis Island.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Even both sides, no roots. Ellis Island, when my grandmother came, was not even built. But she did land in the North End, on Fleet Street. And she got off the boat. Of course, she didn't know the language and so forth, but heard a language that was somewhat similar to Italian, which happens to be Spanish. It was Spanish fishermen, and they sort of helped her where to go. So she took off with my aunt. Eventually got work. She washed floors in doctor's offices. She worked for a lot of in doctor's offices. And that's
And
why,
Boston Athenaeum.
yeah, and then Athenaeum, and I think that's why I think other than, I don't know, my oldest aunt and oldest uncle, but I think all her children were born in a hospital, you know, which is, my father was born in 1910, which is somewhat very odd at 1910 to be born in a hospital.
Mm.
They had midwives and they were all born at home.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but she knew doctors, and I guess doctors told her the place to go and have your baby is, and my father was not he was the youngest of boys, but I have an aunt who was 2 years younger than my father. And so, my father, you know, typical North End, we'll say in the 1920s, he's 10 years old, he's 15 years old in 1925. And 15-year-olds at that time were much like someone who's 35 today.
Mm.
Okay, their knowledge, okay, was extremely different, and they knew an awful lot. Those two little boys over there, right? They're probably 6 years old. And
For the saw.
right, and you ask any 6-year-old today what you would like to do with a hammer or a saw, they were not going to say that, but you can tell them what would you do with a telephone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then your dad,
Right.
what was his journey?
His journey was, well, at the time we had prohibition.
Yep. This is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. And someone needed to cart the alcohol illegally from place A to place B. And my father was selling, with his brother, selling alcohol, okay? And they made an awful lot of money,
Mhm.
okay? But as quick as the money came in, the money went out. Okay.
Why, they had a taste for good things?
Oh,
or-
yeah, my father had 3 cars, he never had a car, he never had a license, he had 3 cars. And expensive cars, but he had friends and they drove it and so forth, but eventually they get sold. You know, so they, it was strange, of course, I was born after prohibition, my sister was close to, and he did that, and he met my mother, and my mother told him, you have 2 choices, me or the alcohol, and I'm here, so I guess my mother won.
Yeah. I love the visual of generations back of Dominic's family bootlegging here in the North End. Just
Yeah.
kills
And a lot
me.
of competition.
I bet. Do either of you remember, Chris, growing up in, well, running around this area, do you remember this facility that we're in now as the building?
Police station.
Police station number 1.
Yeah,
Yeah,
police station, because I more remember when the school was on North Bennet Street, because that's the windows that I would look at, and I didn't even realize that the school had moved when I was thinking about coming here. And then I was like, oh, it's a new location. So because the last time that I was in the North, like consistently in the North End every day, it was on North Bennet Street.
mm-hmm.
So
Do you remember as a?
That's the police station?
yeah, police
Yeah.
station.
Yes, yes, yeah, the print building,
Yep.
City of Boston print building was there. Police station was here, and the tunnel administration was
Mhm.
at the other end.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I want to get into, this is more of a personal question, because I am so interested in the Big Dig. It's been completed for a long time. We know how drastically it, the elevated highway initially
Yeah.
messed with the North End. When, what was it like for you watching it come down and joining the North End back to the rest of Boston?
Well,
I'm very happy. In fact, the only thing I'm disappointed in, we didn't need a greenway. What should have been put on top of the ramp, which was initially, it was supposed to be, the tunnel was supposed to be the foundation for small buildings. And I think they should have put the small buildings on it. It would actually add revenue to the city. Okay, we really didn't need any more parks. We have plenty of parks, and you're at the Boston Common to a point where we had a pope come to the city of Boston. And we have a big park called Government Center, and his mass was in the Boston Common. Which really meant that we don't need, as an architect, we didn't need what we have today. And what they could have done is put smaller seven-story maximum height buildings on the greenway, and we have this angle because the greenway goes, it's not straight. It makes these, so you'll end up always with the end of something. So the end of a rectangle, which is and you plant on those ends, and you do what they did in Post Office Square. You make,
which is beautiful.
Make the neighbors maintain it. Now,
what an interesting thought. I've never visualized that. And
so you could have the building
subsidize the tunnel. Subsidize.
You could have the buildings, the tunnel, and building on top of it that and give you and you can have greenways, okay, which will be taken care of by the owners of the buildings, okay, which means you're not using city funds.
Right. What did it mean for you, Chris, to watch? To exist with it there and then to watch it transform.
I remember being really significant because, well, my family grew up on Endicott Street and towards the end, right where the highway was. So it was, you couldn't see, you would just see this big green structure kind of going through where all the cars were. And I remember whenever there was fireworks, you could drive right there and then stop your car in the middle of the highway and watch the fireworks. Everyone did, because it was like a perfect location and everyone had their radios on and you just stop right on the highway and watch them. But did you ever do that?
No. I've been to the fireworks at the Esplanade, and then there was a garage in Medford. Just up at the roof and you could see them, so which was good. But no, we see. I remember when before the green structure went through. I can tell you what Hanover Street was like. In fact, if you want to know what the end of Salem Street looks like, if you go to Blackstone Street and Cross Street, you will see the paving has this odd shape, brick colored, different than the rest of them, and that's the front doors, would have been the front doors of the buildings that were on Salem Street. There was a variety of buildings. There was, Hanover Street was very active.
Okay. Yeah, there's that Italian shoe store there every single year that I would go and get my pair of shoes from the Italian shoe store. Yeah.
These are Mauritius.
Yeah. Right there. I remember going in there and
so the Hanover Street was very busy and up to a point, and then it was a little quiet, and then you had Scully Square. Scully Square is infamous. Most people don't realize Scully Square was remembered by a lot of American sailors, American soldiers, okay? And it was that if you get to Boston, make sure you go to Scully Square.
My grandfather, that's how I learned of Scully Square.
Right.
Yeah.
And and it was, of course, it was a drinking place. So and that's, but if you're 12 weeks on a ship out in the Atlantic Ocean, I think and come home and get drunk. If you wish to.
But yeah, getting back to the Big Dig, it created a lot of jobs for local North Enders as well, in the sense, like, my aunt had a second job. She worked in her little convenience store, but she also worked for the Big Dig. Like, she would go and do like inspection of different sites. It was just funny. And then someone else, a friend of hers, was artistic, and she got all of like some dirt and she put it in these little bottles and called it Big Dig Dirt, and she was like selling dirt, and it was just part of like the life,
economy.
the economy, and the life of the tunnel going underground. And then I remember saying, when I get my license, I can't wait to like be one of the first cars to drive underground. But then it took like so many more years than it was supposed to, and I felt like it was never going to happen. I had already had my license. It was just like,
well, it was typical government.
Yeah.
If you want something done, just don't go to the government.
Just do it yourself.
Right, just farm it. I don't think they would close you down.
Mhm.
And it's mind-boggling.
Yeah. I want to go back to a question that I didn't necessarily get an answer from you, Chris. Would you share a memory of a teacher or another person at NBSS that made an impression on you, like a lasting? And I'm sure there are several, but.
oh, I don't know if I could just pick one. I feel like it's just been so significant, this experience for me going to this school, because I was interested in this program for so many years, and I had a really special experience my second year. It was sad that Michael, our second year teacher, went away to France to work on Notre Dame, which is incredible. And Michael is so amazing. I love working with Michael. But with him leaving for some of the time, every single week or two, we had a different instructor come in. So we were exposed to so many different people, which it was like, that's such a positive, but the negative is Michael wasn't there. So it was like, yeah, but it was really cool to get so much perspective from all these different people that I don't know if the regular year you would have that amount of teachers, because he was away for a couple months. So we had so many different teachers. And then we were able to go to Nantucket for 2 weeks, which is not the norm for, I think, the program. Maybe it's around a week. And we went for 2 weeks, and a lot of us made connections with Penn Austin. And now I have 3 or 4 classmates who moved to Nantucket. I was able to spend a month in Nantucket, and there's a project going on there until the end of this year. And she was like, anytime you want to come back.
So the connections,
I feel like that is the biggest thing that this school has given me, other than a foundation of skills, is the connections. Because since graduating, there's been some people who in the community, because I do a lot of volunteering. I know a lot of different people. I'm from the Boston area, so people don't know exactly what the program is that I graduated from, but they're like, oh, preservation, oh, carpentry, okay, I have this job, I have this project, which is amazing. But some of it, I don't really know how to do so well. So I could have this connection of teachers and people that I could reach out to and say, hey, what do you think about this project? Or can you put me in touch with like these other people? And everyone has just been so generous in this field to share their knowledge, because I don't know about other departments, but I know preservation, a lot of the people are getting older, retiring. Everyone wants to save buildings and wants to pass on the knowledge. So there's been just so much generosity of people's knowledge, which I've appreciated so much, and just trying to take it all in and just learn from everyone.
Well, to connect the two of you using community as, those connections. I mean, Dominic, you are still an active participant in the school. You come to visit us almost every year. And you, as at age 10 and on, you created those friendships with your neighborhood kids. Lasted.
Adjunct professor at Endicott College.
Yeah. So, you know, it kind of ties in the effect of the institution that it's having in both of your lives.
And I think, well, even at the Boston Architectural College, I taught there. I think growing up where you sort of make a family, a group, my friends will say my 10 buddies, right?
Yeah.
I treat my students the same way. I try to make them
Try to make them
yeah,
together.
right, and in fact, I was just talking to the dean to find out what time, if they change my time or schedule for, I start teaching Monday. And he says, no, keep your class the way it is, he says, because the students loved it. He says, don't make any changes. And well, a couple of changes I want to make. I want to make changes for the better, so, it's, and I want my students to work together. I tell them, you don't make a mistake, okay? If there's a mistake, you can correct it. There's erasers on every pencil that I want. So you don't want, so, but merge together. You have a problem and you know your partner next to you is good at that, ask him.
Mhm.
It won't hurt his grade, it'll help your grade.
Yeah, lean on each other.
Yeah.
Right, be family, be united, and all my students, well, through there, because I taught at the Architecture Center for about 25 years. And I used to teach hand drawing, and I had students that graduated and their thesis was done with hand drawings and not computer.
That's amazing
Yeah.
and unusual, right?
Well, because
Now,
if you want, it is to a point, yes. If you, an architect's a creator, okay? I mean, you can steal something or take something and copy it, okay? But you could also sit down and create it, okay? I don't have two buildings in all my career that are the same. Yeah, I have lots of houses, I have lots of apartment buildings, but then none of them are the same. I can't take the drawings and use them. So that's the way it should be. And you, I want my students to not just like me, okay, and not just come for a grade, because I very rarely would fail a person. You have to be.
you have to do something really bad.
Only one person, I won't say why, but to all my ears.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
both sides.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, having a community, and even some of the projects that I'm hopefully working on further along this year. There's another student who graduated with me who, we're gonna work together on that, and then I've been in contact with a few other students that we graduated together, and I've already worked with a few other students in Nantucket and then in a job in Maine, and I needed some help, and I reached out to someone to help me out, and it was awesome. And it's like we continue to grow and learn together, and every single person, even though we went through the same program, took away different skills, we came from different backgrounds, and we all want to save buildings and preserve them. So we should all be working together to try to uplift everyone so we can all be better in the field.
you're also, all of you are the future of the trade.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You have to stand by each other. and work
Exactly.
together.
Yeah.
For our guests, if you have questions for Dominic and Chris, now is your chance. So just type them into the chat or Q&A window. I have a question. It's a little complex. So we're talking about how you feel a connection to the historical presence of North Bennet. Dominic, when you were a student in 1948, North Bennet Street Industrial School was 67 years old already as a school, as a social services hub. Chris, when you were a student, the school was 142 years old. So you definitely felt you have the weight of, a massive amount of history behind you. Dominic, when you were a student, 1948, did you feel the history of the place behind you?
not so much as the place behind me, but I was very familiar with the history, even at that age of Boston, because sightseeing, it wasn't a bus. The war was on, and sightseeing was a big carriage, horse-drawn. And of course, they would be coming down Hanover Street, which is where I live, to see the old church, okay? They didn't really use St. Stephen's Church. St. Stephen's Church got changed by the Irish community. I don't know if you know, but John F. Kennedy's mother was born on Garden Court Street in the North End.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And she was baptized in St. Stephen's Church, and she had her final mass in St. Stephen's Church.
Wow.
And she gave the money to bring the building back to Charles Bulfinch's original design, which was done before she died. Anyways. So we had, we played in Cops Hill Cemetery. Okay, so I sort of knew the history, we knew Paul Revere's house, and my father, being an antique collector, we would go and hunt through hunt through Boston for antiques. South End was loaded with antiques.
Yeah.
Okay, and because South End never made it, and I guess they left a lot of things, and they became antiques. And so every Saturday we would walk from the North End to the South End. And we didn't take the train or a bus, we walked.
Yeah.
Not that far a walk really, but we would go.
Are you saying though that when you were playing on Hanover Street that the tourist bus would come by and you would pick up on their historical tours?
Oh yeah, we try.
Horse and buggy.
I can't remember the poem that we had. We used to say at the old church and get a nickel from everybody. And then go into Joe Black's and spend it.
Make it, spend it. What about you? 142 years behind you when you came to school here.
Well, I feel like, so my grandparent, so it was my grandfather, was born in Italy, and then he came here through Ellis Island on the ship called the Rex. And he came in 1938. And he didn't know any English. So I don't know this as a fact, but there's high likelihood that he went to North Bennet Street School because this was a community center that spoke English. And the fact that because he learned English right away, and then his first child went here, my aunt, for camp. So he already knew about this. So it's like I felt the history of this place, even though it was 140 years old. It's for me, it was just like something that was part of my first generation being in the United States. The North Bennet Street School was part of that. So, and the fact that I, as a child, just knew about this school and how awesome it was, and encouraged to come here. And I should have gone a lot earlier than I did. It took me quite a while and a lot of different careers and paths in order to make my way here. But yeah, I knew so much about it, and I felt that history.
Yeah, great to hear.
Yeah.
I just want to show off here a really sweet chair made in 1948 at 10 years old.
Wow.
And that's our program. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you too for spending your evening with me. It's been really great.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. Again. Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.